Hey, what's up, and thanks for watching Top Class Tutorials. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the mastering session that I got to work on the other day by Trustnoone. The name of the song was We Outside. Background behind the project, a friend of mine who shoots videos and is a videographer, he reached out and told me about the artist, and then the artist reached out to me through Instagram. I gladly accepted the project, and once all the files were received, I got to work on it. I sent my version, the artist loved it, and so now here I am just describing and talking about all the plugins that I used and my thought process behind them. So real quick, I just wanted to do a before and after. I have a sample of their mix that they sent me to use as a reference. Now I have made some adjustments and turned the volume down so that it doesn't clip, but you'll get the gist of kind of what they had when they finished and then what I was kind of aiming for. So here's their version.
Trust no one.
Hold on, let me change something. It's getting a little glitchy. All right, let's see how this sounds.
Trust no one.
Pussy like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in his vest. 5-star bitch, and he like my attitude. Coochie like I'm Suki, yeah, put him in the mood. I like to watch him eat it, come and put that dick inside. And I ain't talking about no Bentley when I say I wanna ride. And we smoking on that KK, you can see it in my eyes. If I catch him talking shit, tell them hoes we outside, we outside. Yeah, tell them hoes we outside. We outside, ho. Bitch, I'm tough as nails. You can call me Hammer Time. And my DMs get to booming cause they know a bitch fine. And yeah, I'm taking dick like an ATM machine. And yeah, he feed me green cause this pussy ain't for free. I'm a trill ass bitch.
So that was their version. And now here is my version. Also, I'll kind of make this a little more accurate. There we go. Now here's my version.
Trust no one.
Pussy like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in his wood. 5-star bitch, and he like my attitude. Coochie like I'm Suki, yeah, put him in the mood. I like to watch him eat it, come and put that dick inside. And I ain't talking about no Bentley when I say I wanna ride. And we smoking on that KK, you can see it in my eyes. If I catch him talking shit, tell them hoes we outside, we outside. Yeah, tell them hoes we outside. We outside, ho. Bitch, I'm tough as nails. You can call me Hammer Time. And my DMs get to booming cause they know a bitch fine. And yeah, I'm taking dick like an ATM.
So you get the idea. I tried to keep the same vibe and energy that they had in their version, but kind of just enhance it and touch it up a little bit. So something else to mention is I asked the artists what they felt if they had a song that best embodied kind of their vision for what they wanted their song to sound like. And they didn't have a particular reference song. However, she said she liked artists like Bia, Lotto, and a couple other artists, but I got the vibe that she was going for. And when she told me Bia, that kind of really kind of resonated with me. So If you want to get an idea of kind of maybe like what my reference uh, songs were, maybe just play those kind of, in Spotify or iTunes or whatever you use, or YouTube. But I obviously can't play them in the live stream because I'll get docked for copyright. But what I did was I had the Be a song in here, and I would just mute it when I didn't need it, and then solo it out just to kind of go back and forth between the reference of Be a and what my master version was coming out like. So listen to that song and maybe listen to this video or watch the video again, and you'll get an idea of kind of what I was talking about. So I just kind of wanted to go through this now and talk about my steps behind doing this. Also, what I'm going to do is play a version that it originally sounded like, or I just want to play how it originally sounded when I first received it. So we will select these. By the way, the tracks that I'm hiding right now, they are the committed versions, or printed audio with the plugins already printed into them. So I'll describe that here in a second. Just want to get my stuff set up right here. All right, almost there. So select these, make active. Hopefully this doesn't cause too much delay and lag in the system. So what I'm going to do is deactivate all these plugins on these tracks. We're also going to unfreeze this track, and I'll explain that here in a second. All right, so I'm going to select all my tracks here. And if I use the key command Option Control Shift and click on the plugin, it will make all the plugins that are in that slot of all your tracks selected and active. So if you can see here, as I'm holding and pressing down these buttons, it's getting rid of these plugins. Now, what I do want to keep is, or the only plugin that actually is doing anything, is just Pro Limiter right here, but you'll see it's really not doing much of anything. And I'll go to my mixer so you can see my volume. Now there is some volume adjustment. When I originally got this session, the volume was not quite balanced like this. But point is, I have no plugins on here. There's no processing. This is just with just volume and panning. So check out what it sounded like when I first received the project.
Trust no one.
Pussy like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in this wood. 5-star bitch, and he like my attitude. Coochie like I'm Suki, yeah, put him in the mood. I like to watch him eat it, come and put that dick inside. And I ain't talking about no Bentley when I say I wanna ride. And we smoking on that KK, you can see it in my eyes. If I catch him talking shit, tell them hoes we outside, we outside. Yeah, tell them hoes we outside. We outside, ho. Bitch, I'm tough as nails, you can call me.
So it needed a lot of work just to kind of bring it to where I wanted it and to sound more closer to their mix. Which I'm going to go ahead and talk about this right now since we're kind of getting into the stems of the song. I always request stems from my artists when I do my masters, and I don't need every individual track. I just need essentially the main components of the instrumental, drums, bass, 808 if you're doing trap and hip hop, piano, keys, synths, effects, things like that. Just pretty much everything routed into subgroups and then sending those stems as opposed to sending, kick 1, kick 2, snare 1, snare 2, hi-hat 1, hi-hat 2, and, having all these individual tracks. I will request the stems of the buses for the instrumental, and then I'll just have the engineer also send stems of the lead vocal, background vocals, and ad libs. And they can kind of do it however they want. I'm not too picky with the vocals because I'm gonna route them all to a bus anyway for later processing. So I always request the stems, and I know a lot of mastering engineers, they just want just the mix. I particularly ask for the stems because it just helps me when I'm doing mastering. Sometimes there's just, I'll add a plugin or add compression, and all of a sudden maybe the hi-hat, isn't, present enough. And instead of me fiddling around with the compression and EQ, if I have the stems, all I need to do is just turn the snare up or turn the drums up or do something with the stems as opposed to looking at it as processing the entire mix in one file. Now, if a artist does request that I, work with just the mix, I tell them, sure, no problem. I have no problem with that. I've done, a lot of masters in the past with just the stereo mix, but as I got more into it, I started requesting the stems. And a lot of engineers are just totally okay with it. They don't care how I do it. They just want me to, master it. Or artists don't care, or whoever. So, just wanted to just, put that out there. I'm working with the stems. This isn't a mix by any means. This was already mixed and mastered by the engineer who, originally did this, and they sent just everything over to me. And this is just in its raw, natural form. And then I just kind of just tweaked a couple things to kind of bring it more to what I thought it should be. So I'm going to start with the music because that's where I start almost always. And I always start with the kick and the 808. And in this particular song, there was no kick. There was only this 808 playing right here. Make this a little bit bigger so you can see. So the only thing that they really had playing at any point in time for like any bass was going to be this 808 right here. So it was cool. We'll play this section because it really kind of helps describe what I'm trying to showcase here. So actually, I don't want to play that part because it has that clip in there. I wanted it to have more kind of punch, more kick, more impact, and it just didn't deliver that. So instead of me, what I could have done is maybe gone in and just put a kick in there from, my sample kit, or just layered any kick in there. But I didn't want to affect their mix, right? Adding another kick in there, that's kind of like me kind of, doing production work and mixing at the same time, and I'm not mixing this song. I'm enhancing what's already been given to me. So to do this, I use Shaperbox 3 by Cable Guys. I really love this plugin. I use it for sidechaining and stuff like that. But what I did in this instance is create an enveloper where every time a transient was detected, it would essentially create this envelope for it where the volume would peak and then kind of come down and then stabilize. And then I just kind of have it resonate out kind of around this. And it kind of goes slightly up right here, but not enough. It just kind of helps bring that 808 kind of more up front. So here is without the plugin, and then I'll turn it on after it plays. So it adds that kind of little punch right in the beginning that kind of creates that kind of poppy, clicky kind of sound. And when I show you the committed version of this, you'll totally see that there is a slight little peak kind of in the beginning that kind of helps give that kind of punch and that kick. The next move that I made was on these tubular bells. So on the tubular bells, I'll say this. What I'll do a lot of times is I check my mixes in mono. I'll just check mono in general just to see how things sound. And when I summed this particular track, when I summed the mix up to mono, the tubular bells basically kind of got lost. And a cool trick that you can do to kind of give some stereo width is by either one, using delay, or if you have Pro Tools, they have this plugin called Time Adjuster. And what Time Adjuster will do is adjust the signal of one side to be later than the other. Or you can do both, and you can also change the volume as well. You can also flip the phase. So it's got some cool, interesting little things that you can do in here with it. So I'll play the tubular bells without the plugin, and then I'll play it with. Now, you'll totally hear the effect in stereo, but what you can also try doing is, if you have the ability to sum your mix up to mono, listen to what I'm about to play in mono, and then when I bypass the plugin, listen to it in mono, and you'll see how much wider it becomes in stereo. So check this out. So no big deal, just tubular bells, got kind of like some reverb and kind of some space on it. It's pretty wide, not really, super narrow. But when you listen to it in mono, it really doesn't have that stereo like feel and effect. Now watch when I unbypass this plugin and now listen to it. That's pretty cool, right? So here's without it. And here's with the plugin. Pretty cool, right? Like, it really makes it sound bigger and wider, and it doesn't cause phase cancellation like some of these other widening plugins and things like that. So that was one of my thought processes there. The next thing I did was work on the snare. And with the snare, I wanted it to have a little bit more snap and a little less body. So I'll play the snare without the plugin. And now here is with. So it just makes it a little bit more snappy. So I turn the attack pretty much all the way up. And then I have gain on here. I have it in uh, limit mode, I guess. I don't know what that really does. And then I turned up the sustain 10%. But mostly the big thing here is turning down this gain to compensate, because when you adjust the attack of percussive instruments, it makes the volume much louder initially, and so it peaks a little bit louder. So turning down the gain just to compensate. My next move was on these hi-hats. Now, with the hi-hats, I had to do this a certain way. So I started off by adding a EQ just to kind of shape the hi-hat. So first I'll play without any plugins or any processing. This is how the hi-hat drum loop sounded. So just kind of like a hi-hat loop, basically. My first move was to add a EQ to roll off any unnecessary low end, and then I kind of used a shell filter just to kind of lower some of that harsh area. My next move was the saturation filter. I used hard clip with about 2 dB of drive, and there's a little resonance on here of 1. The output I turned down by about -1 dB. There is some, gain boost from this plugin. So I'll play without. And here's with. And this plugin really helps that hi-hat not sound so piercing. Like if you really listen to like the hi-hat and like the tickiness of it, this plugin really helps to smooth out that top end and just kind of give it like some natural kind of compression sound. So check this out. Without. With. So it just really helps smooth it out. My next plugin was Soothe. And Soothe basically tames resonant frequencies. It's kind of like compression, but it works a little bit differently. It kind of looks like an EQ here, but basically what this means is when I grab one of these nodes and push it up, I'm telling the plugin that I want it to do more processing in this area, and you'll see that here in a minute. So here's without the plugin. And now here's with the plugin. So you see how it's kind of like compression, but it's really only working in these areas. And you could almost say it's kind of like dynamic EQ, but it's just a little bit more than that. It's really just focusing on like resonant frequencies. It doesn't necessarily just shoot for the initial fundamental frequency within a sound. Cool plugin, highly recommend it. But it is super CPU heavy. So what I end up doing at some point is committing these tracks or freezing them. So the last thing I did was put on a limiter just to tame those peaks. So here it's without, and now here's with. And this was a mastering decision because, I still get the effect of that snare without having those extra 3 or 4 dBs of that, peak in there. So, to get a little bit more headroom, I'll put a limiter on my drums to just kind of just tame everything and bring it to a nice even level. And at some point during the mastering process, I decided that the pad, this like synth pad that's kind of like playing underneath all the time, was really clashing with the vocals. And I really wanted to just flatten it out as much as I possibly could. So here is that pad with no processing. It's super quiet, but you get the idea. So here is with the limiter plugin turned on. So if you can see, it's doing a lot of peak reduction, and that's intentional. I just really want to flatten this sound out and really push it as far back as possible. After I added that limiter, I then used a EQ to roll off any unnecessary low end. It's kind of starting to roll off around 500 hertz, and then kind of slowly, gradually goes down to about 80 and 100, and then everything at around like 40 hertz, or everything from about 30 hertz to about 80 hertz is this huge slope right here. And then I guess technically everything after or below 30 hertz is just completely cut off, and that's perfect because I don't want this pad to interact with my 808 or my bass or any other instruments, really. It just needs to fill that void in kind of the mid-range area. So here is the pad once again with no processing. And now here's with the plugins. So really subtle, and I know it's kind of hard to hear because the volume's so low, but what I'm going to do is now select all of my instrumental track, and I'm going to bypass all the plugins on the instrumental and play a version, or play the beat with no plugins, and then turn them on so you can hear the difference. So here is the beat with no plugins. I'm going to play it a little bit further down because the whole point is to kind of get that 808 in there along with everything else. So we'll just do a little shift here. All right, so now let's check this out. So it sounds good by itself, and then when I add all my plugins and processing, it sounds like this. And now here's before. And now here's with plugins. So it sounds a little bit tighter, especially with the hi-hat and the snare. It sounds a little bit more percussive, a little bit kind of more like in your face. The kick and the 808 definitely kind of have a little bit more thump. So hopefully you can hear those differences. Now, what I eventually ended up doing is committing and printing all of these plugins into audio files. So hide and make inactive. And I do that intentionally. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, what I'll do is leave those up and running for right now. And make them active. So I'll leave those active for right now, and I'll get back to those later. But basically what I ended up doing is just taking all these tracks with plugins and just committing and printing those effects. I do this for a couple reasons. The biggest one is, as time goes on, some of these plugins may just become obsolete as your computer operating system updates. The plugins may no longer work with your operating system. And if, say, for whatever reason, you have to go back to an older session that you did 10, 15 years ago to try to get the vocals, and then you go to open up the session and all your plugins are completely missing and the vocal does not sound the same, you're going to be giving yourself just extra work to do, trying to make it sound like how you had it before, which can be a lot more difficult than you think. Sometimes it's, just nearly impossible to get it to sound identical to how you had it originally. So I commit for that biggest main reason right there. If I go to another studio and they don't have my plugins, I don't have to worry about them not having the plugin because the effects already been printed into the audio file. This goes for things like auto tune, and other, spatial effects like reverb plugins, delay, et cetera, et cetera. So long story short, just commit and print your effects into the tracks, and just save the original versions kind of as a backup somewhere else, or hide them or make them inactive or whatever. So now we'll get down to these vocals here, and I'll move a little bit quicker. So with the vocals, I did not want to make very many changes, but I definitely did make some changes. So here are the vocals just by themselves, so you can really hear how they sounded.
Pussy like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in this wood. 5-star bitch, and he like my attitude.
Ooh.
Coochie like I'm Suki.
So it was cool. The lead vocal is right here. I used a limiter to just tame any peaks going above 0 dB. And then I also have a saturation filter just to kind of add a little bit more harmonic content. So I will play without the plugins, and then I'll turn them on.
Pussy like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in this wood. Pussy like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in this wood. 5-star bitch, and he like my attitude.
Ooh.
Coochie like I'm Suki.
So this limiter is just taming any peaks that go past -1 dB, and then adding some harmonic stuff there. Similar with the background vocals, there's not much going on there. I have a EQ that is just kind of rolling off, or not rolling off, it's a shelf, so it's just kind of lowering some of these higher frequencies. I wanted to push it behind the lead vocal a little bit more. And then there's a limiter doing quite a significant amount of limiting on here. I did not want the background vocals to really have too much dynamic range. I really wanted them to feel in the background compressed, and just not clashing with the lead vocal. So I used a limiter just to crush the hell out of them.
Colonel, yeah, good. And I always in this wood. 5-star bitch, my attitude. I'm Suki, yeah, put him in the mood.
So you saw it kind of hit that limiter hard there, but it does it in some other places later on where it's doing more. So check this out. Play it right here.
And I say I wanna ride. See it in my eyes. If I catch them talking shit, tell them hoes we outside.
So at some point, it's doing like -2, -3 dBs of reduction just to really just kind of just crush it and put it in the background. And then last thing is the ad libs. Pretty much similar. It's really just crushing the hell out of them, making sure that they're not competing with the lead vocal at all.
Facts. Ooh.
So I'll also go ahead and talk about this move right here. So I thought the vocals had a good amount of reverb on them, but they just needed a little bit more. So I'll play the vocals and with all my processing so you can hear them, and then I'll just kind of add my reverb in there, and it totally just gives them a little bit more width and space.
See, like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in this wood. 5-star bitch, and he like my attitude. Coochie like I'm Suki, yeah, put him in the mood. I like to watch him eat it, come and put that.
So it just kind of helped bring it out a little bit more, in my opinion. It's not a lot, it's very subtle, but you hear it when I take it out for sure.
See, like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in this wood. 5-star bitch, and he like my attitude. Coochie like I'm Suki, yeah, put him in the
Subtle, but it works. So the next moves that I started making were to all the vocals collectively together, and this is a little bit more dramatic than what I was doing before. So in here I have a boost on the top end. I have this little notch filter right here around 7.5 kilohertz. That's kind of being used as a de-esser. And then I also have this upward expansion EQ, where basically it's helping push the presence of her vocals up a little bit more. They felt a little bit thin to me, so I just kind of helped push them up a little bit more, especially after I added like the limiter. A lot of this area got completely cut off, so just trying to kind of like add it back in. And then just some house cleaning work, just rolling everything off around 20 hertz, and then it's kind of also kind of touching on the 40 and the 50 area as well. And then the next thing I have is my LA2A compressor, classic go-to compressor for vocals. What's interesting that I have going on here is I'm not compressing the full signal. I'm actually using this as a parallel type compression. So I have the mix knob, I think a little bit under 50% right here. It's not really percent. It's kind of, between 11 and 12 o'clock ish. And that just to me, I think is like 50%. 50% is at 12 o'clock to me. It's doing a good bit of peak reduction at, some points about 4 to 5 dB, but mostly around 2 to 3 dB of gain reduction, just to kind of help smooth out the vocal and tame any, wild peaks that might be slipping through. And then I have this plugin, an initial clipper. And what I really like to use this plugin for is not as much the clipping as much as I like to use it for the saturation. But the way that the saturation works is it kind of has to clip the audio to get the saturation. So the byproduct of this is basically I get a really good saturated vocal that has, some soft clipping on there. But I also get a lot more gain from it. So it gets louder. And so for that reason, I have to either add a volume adjustment plugin or I go to my Pro Limiter, which is a stock plugin in Pro Tools because it's got my meters and things like that. But basically what it's doing is it's not doing any peak reduction. It's essentially just bringing down the volume of the vocal after I add the initial clipper to it. So I'll go ahead and play the vocals without any of my vocal bus processing, and then I will add the plugins back in.
Pussy like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in this wood. 5-star bitch, and he like my attitude. Coochie like I'm Suki, yeah, put him in the mood. I like to watch him eat it, come and put that.
Okay, and now here is with all of the plugins.
Pussy like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in this wood. 5-star bitch, and he like my attitude. Coochie like I'm Suki, yeah, put him in the mood. I like to watch him eat it.
I don't know if you can really hear the difference, but it sounds a lot more just controlled, less dynamic, but it doesn't feel different. So here's the original.
Pussy like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in this wood. 5-star bitch, and he like my attitude. Coochie like I'm Suki, yeah, put him in the mood. I like to.
So I kind of bypassed the plugins and unbypassed them in between. So hopefully you kind of heard the difference, and it just makes it less dynamic, makes it feel a little bit more level with the instrumental, but it doesn't sound or feel different. I didn't take away from the performance, and that wasn't my goal. Again, I'm mastering this project, I'm not mixing it. I'm just adding what I feel like I need to do to master this song. And something that I didn't mention before, which I'll talk about now, let me just make this a little more visible here. So all of the moves that I essentially made with these plugins and adjusting volume and things like that were based off of how it sounded going through my mastering chain, because I already had my plugins enabled and turned on. Now for this video, I have them turned off just because right now, if I try to turn all these plugins on, it'll just cause latency and problems. It's easier just for me to turn those on later. But what I'm trying to say here is all my decisions that you saw me do just now were based off of how it sounded going through these other plugins. And these other plugins weren't necessarily set to how they are now. I've made minor little detailed changes as I was mastering the song, but essentially I had compression, EQ, a limiter, and some other processing on the master bus, or in this case, my mix bus, which I'm using as my mastering chain. And as I fed audio into my mastering chain, I made decisions. Hey, does it need more bass? Does it need more top end? Does it need less dynamics? Does it need compression? So it's important for you to kind of get your song as close to possible to the finished product, and then start to make your tonal adjustments and things like that. And so all of these adjustments that I made and all the plugins that I chose were because of how it sounded going through my mastering chain. Now I'll go ahead and play a section of the song here, and I'm going to play everything. So this will be the vocals and the instrumental together, but it will be with no plugins except for just well, I guess that's going to be turned off too, but it will be no plugins except for a limiter, just to see kind of where we're at volume wise and monitor that. So I will go ahead and play the song with no plugins.
Pussy like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in this wood. 5-star bitch, and he like my attitude. Coochie like I'm Suki, yeah, put him in the pussy.
So that is without any plugins, and now here is with all of my plugins and processing.
Pussy like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in this wood. 5-star bitch, and he like my attitude. Coochie like I'm Suki, yeah, put him in.
So I didn't take away from the original sound, but I did kind of help balance things out a little bit more, make things a little bit more level, especially with limiting. It's a big thing in compression, just limiting peaks just to make sure that they're not hitting your master chain of your compression. So anywho, back to what I was saying earlier, where what I at some point do is commit and print all my plugins, so that way I don't have to worry about delay compensation, missing plugins, and things of that nature. So I'll go ahead and do that really quickly so you can see what exactly I'm talking about. So we'll take all of these tracks and to make them inactive. And then we'll take all of these tracks and make them active. So now what you're looking at is all of those previous vocal tracks and instrumental tracks just converted and bounced into audio files with the plugins already on them. And so now it sounds like this.
Trust no one.
Pussy like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in this wood. 5-star bitch, and he like my attitude. Coochie like.
So that way all my plugins and everything are printed in there. Now I'll start to talk about my mastering chain. And I'm going to do this very, very, very quickly. And I'm not going to really be doing before and after of every single plugin. So try to pay attention to kind of the details that I'm describing here. So my first move that I make when I'm mastering a song is to use tape emulation, tape compression, things of that nature. Tape has this natural harmonic saturation that it gives vocals, especially when you drive it really hard. And when you drive it really hard, you get this kind of natural compression effect, especially with bass and percussive things. So this is doing a lot of tape compression. It's really driving this track a lot and giving some harmonic tonal quality. The next plugin that I have is my SSL bus compressor. And what's special about these settings is on the sidechain filter, I have it around, I would say it's around like 100 hertz. I'm not really sure. It doesn't have a number right here, but if I had to guess, that's around like 100 hertz or anywhere between 500 hertz and 50 hertz. So I don't know, like 250 maybe. But point is, it's not reacting to the kick and the bass and the 808 as much. And so that way, when I do get compression, it's really just on the peaks of the snare, a little bit of the vocals, some of the other instruments that kind of come in that are percussive. So it's really just kind of just taming and balancing out the frequency spectrum. It's not really compressing the bass or the 808s or the kick or anything like that. It does compress the kick, but not as much as it would if I didn't have that sidechain filter on. So the next plugin that I'm using is actually kind of multiple plugins in one. If you ever use any isotope, ozone neutron, or nectar, or any of their other products, they kind of have this module chain where you can kind of add plugins within one plugin. So in this module chain, I have a dynamic section which is doing some upward expansion. This is really something that I love to use on the master once it's kind of compressed enough to where I don't have to worry about it, pumping the song, but just bringing up those quiet parts so the overall volume of the song just sounds louder. But you got to be careful. The attack and release on here, super fast. It's like 0.05 seconds or 0.0, I guess it would be like 50 milliseconds. You want it to be as fast kind of as possible without it sounding kind of like it's adding artifacts and sounding weird. And you don't want it to do too much. So the ratio is at 1.3. Excuse me. So the ratio is at like 1.3. If you start getting into like the 1.4, 1.5, it's too dramatic of a change and it sounds unnatural. So anywhere between like negative 1.1 1.2, 1.3 sounds good to me. After that, you're going to be fighting with the attack and release so much that you might not even, it's just not going to work in my opinion. So anywho, that's a great way to get your mix to sound more. Use upward expansion. And then after that, I wanted to change the tonality a little bit. I boosted up this top end a little bit right here, about 0.5 dB. And then I have this notch right here doing almost -3. It's like doing -2.5 dB of gain reduction right here. And that's just taming those sibilant frequencies, the hi-hats and things like that. This plugin is a bell, but it's not really doing much of anything. It's just kind of here. I think at some point I was using it and then I just zeroed it back out. And then we got almost a dB of boost in the bass. That makes a huge difference, especially when you're boosting all of it together. But point here was I wanted it to have a little bit more bass and boominess. And then some house cleaning. I'm just kind of filtering off anything in this like 20 hertz area to give more emphasis to some of these other notes. Last in this chain, I have a maximizer, which is giving me some volume boost. I'm not using it the way that probably most people would use it. In this case, I have the ceiling and the threshold linked, so basically there's no volume change. It's just basically going to just tame peaks. I'm using the IRC2 mode. I'll like to use the IRC4 and the IRC low latency mode, but in this case I really kind of liked how this one sounded. And then I have the character always set to fast. I never want there to be really any like slow release on these. I want it to really be just as fast and transparent as possible. The cool thing with this plugin or with the Ozone plugins now is they have this soft clip feature. I have it set on medium at 14%. And then the transient emphasis at 33%. Again, this is kind of, I made that move because I wanted the kick to really stand out a little bit more. And I found when I turned on transient emphasis, the 808 and the kick felt like it had a little bit more punch to it, and it didn't sound like it was just compressed and being, sucked away. So that was everything for this module chain. And then the last thing that I have on here is another limiter. Not doing a lot. Well, it is doing a lot. It's doing like 2 or 3 dB of reduction at points. But in the overall scheme of things, this is just giving me an extra little squeeze just to get like a little bit more volume out of it. So now that I've gone through the whole mastering chain, I will take a section and I'll play it and mute and unmute all of my mastering chain plugins. And that will include or it will not include the limiter. So the limiter will still stay engaged, but all of the other plugins will be disabled and then re-enabled. So check this out.
Trust no one.
Pussy like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in this wood. 5-star bitch, and he like my attitude. Coochie like I'm Suki, yeah, put him in the mood. I like to watch him eat it, come and put that dick inside. And I ain't talking about no Bentley when I say I wanna ride. And we smoking on that KK, you can see it in my eyes. If I catch him talking shit, tell them hoes we outside, we outside. Yeah, tell them hoes we outside, ho. Bitch, I'm tough as nails, you can call me hammer time. And my DMs get to booming cause they know a bitch fine. And yeah, I'm taking dick like an ATM machine. And yeah, he feed me green cause this pussy ain't for free.
So obviously it made the song louder, but I also didn't really affect the tonality. it sounds the same as the mix, just minus volume. So that was my finished mix that I sent over to the client. And now, just for a point of reference, let's go back to the mixes. So this version right here is my mastered version that you just heard. And then this green one up here is the artist mastered version. So let's play my finished mix and master. And then we'll shuffle between the two different versions as the song is playing. So let's put these closer together. There we go. All right, there. Now it'll be a little bit easier to kind of see what's going on here. So we're going to play my version first, and then we'll shuffle to the other version.
Trust no one. Trust no one. Trust no one.
Pussy like the Colonel, yeah, it's finger licking good. And I always pack a zip, I'ma roll it in this wood. 5-star bitch, and he like my attitude. Coochie like I'm Suki, yeah, put him in the mood. I like to watch him eat it, come and put that dick inside. And I ain't talking about no Bentley when I say I wanna ride. And we smoking on that KK, you can see it in my eyes. If I catch him talking shit, tell them hoes we outside, we outside. Yeah, tell them hoes we outside, ho. Bitch, I'm tough as nails, you can call me hammer time. And my DMs get to booming cause they know a bitch fine. And yeah, I'm taking dick like an ATM machine. And yeah, he feed me green cause this pussy ain't for free. I'm a trill ass bitch, and I'm from the 618. Then my back look like the arch and I'm gonna stick it in his face. He be on my FaceTime, he be hitting up my phone, but I saw his bank account. Bitch, I'd rather be.
So the biggest difference between their version and my version to me is the hi-hats and the 808. Their hi-hats were very piercing and kind of high up there. Nothing wrong with that. They just had a vision of making it, I think, that type of style. But when I got to the mastering stage and I kind of looked at the levels, it felt a little bit high to me. And the other thing was the kick. The kick in the 808 just needed that oomph, that bass, that, in your face, feel that you wanted from it. Another thing that you can notice just from looking at the two different mixes is their version. I mean, it's just completely like flatlined, at this point right here. You can see where it hit that limiter and just everything just completely got cut off. My version's a little bit more dynamic, but still carries the volume that you want from a song. And that's one of the objectives with mastering. Now, I could have gone for making this track, super fucking loud and compressed, where it looked similar, but I've learned now in my later years of mastering that it doesn't need to sound that way anymore. The loudness war is, I think, no longer an issue. I think now the objective for mastering engineers is to really hone in on making the sound as good as possible and not really focusing on the loudness or the overall lufs or volume or whatever your meter that you're looking at is. So takeaway from this is make your mix sound good, full, big, and loud without really crushing it, limiting it, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope you found this video helpful. As always, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, or if you have any future suggestions for other videos, you can drop those in the comments below. I'm always down to work with anybody, so if anyone wants to collab and work on some projects, just shoot me an email or visit my website. Also, if you need mixing or mastering services, you can head on over to my website and submit a request form, and I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time.